Okay, so I wanted to go over a little bit of my own synth configuration before I break it down completely. Um, if you've watched any of the Casper Electronics DIY synth building videos, parts 1 through 3, this will make some sense. But basically what I have going on here is I have 3 Hex Schmidt triggers, the CD40106 chips up here with several oscillators. I have all of my audio oscillators are down here on the bottom row. I'm actually taking advantage of all 3 on the bottom sides of each one of those. So I have, I guess there would be 9 audio oscillators. And the middle one of each one is modulated, or actually the resistor is replaced with a photocell here in the middle. So the 3 middle ones are all light sensitive. And then out of these 3, 6, and 9 oscillators, I've broken them out into this patch bay over here. So I have 9 cables. The white ones, which are the light sensitive ones. The orange ones are just basically the first inverter on each chip, and if we're looking at it from left to right. And then the red leads are the third inverter on each chip. So 6 audio oscillators here. Ignore this for now. Let's see what else we have here. So I have 2 audio oscillators that are going into my main mix right here, mix 1 and mix 2, which are both a 1-to-1 ratio, I believe, with number 3, which I'll talk about in a minute, being times 10, or amplified 10 times. So I've got 9 audio oscillators down here. Okay, at the top I have only created, it looks like 3 LFOs, low frequency oscillators, that flash an LED at the bottom. And then for the resistors values for each one of those, I'm using these 3 potentiometers. So I cannot tune the pitch of any of my audio oscillators, but I can tune or change the frequency or rate with these 3 potentiometers, or potentiometers, whatever your preferred pronunciation. Down here at the bottom, I do have the CD4040, which is the 12-stage binary counter, which is also a divider, and I have it set up with these LEDs. So I'm probably going to leave that intact, but I will be doing some rearranging here. Additionally, I have all 3 of my LFOs. Each one has an independent LED, but then each one of these is piped into the red, green, and blue channels of the onboard RGB LED. So when you see one flash, it will flash a corresponding color for each one. So there's a lot of stuff going on here that I'm just sort of making sense of, and I really haven't had a chance to dive into the binary counter. So I want to spend some time playing around with that. And then over here I have my 4051, which is the 8-channel multiplexer, which I also am looking forward to play around with. So these 2 chips are introduced in the second DIY synth building video provided by Casper Electronics, and that's the video on sequencers. So I'll play with these a little bit later. I have actually created a modification. Well, actually, it was the Baby 10 sequencer. So it's pretty ugly. That's this guy right here. So I've already broken it out and put it in this case, and it's pretty hideous, but it does have 10 stages of sequencing. It does have 2 different master speeds, as well as a rate knob up here. I think this was supposed to be a pause and advance key, which works with some success, and then this is the control voltage out down here. So this thing is your kind of starter sequencer. But I am really excited to play around with the sequencers mentioned in the aforementioned videos. So let me turn this on just to show you what's happening. And it's really not melodic at all, which again is not really my approach in general. So I'll turn the volume down, and it might be helpful to kill a little bit of light there. Excellent. So our first LED right here is controlled with this potentiometer. So I'll just really slow it down. The next one is controlled here. Actually, I think I've got some stuff patched in here, so I should probably What is going on? What do I have? What is this madness I'm looking at? I'll just leave it alone. Let me tune this down. I think these two are synced somehow, so I need to figure out how I synced these two LEDs together. It's not that one. That was it. Okay. Alright, so I don't know why. Yeah, I think I'm just going to pull that out. I don't necessarily need that. So now I have this LED being controlled here. I have this one in the middle. Let's get in where we can see it. I'll slow it down a little bit too. Yeah. So it goes down pretty slow, but not quite as slow as this one because I have a lower value capacitor right here. And then we have this third one over here, so I'll turn that one down quite a bit as well. That should have a pretty slow oscillation as well. So what you should see, as these are blinking, that the RGB LED will blink in conjunction with the way these three different ones blink. And of course, when two or more are lit at the same time, that means that they are the red, green, and or blue channels are active, which ends up mixing colors. That's why you see violets and kind of oranges and pinks. It's because of the way that these three are on. So if I were to speed all these up, you would probably see just a kind of a really vibrant RGB LED. Almost, yeah, it's like white. Okay, so those are my LFOs, my low frequency oscillators. I'm actually patching in two different sets of audio oscillators down here, so we'll kind of ignore the LFOs, I think, for now, unless I have them patched in. Oh, the reason that, yeah, so I forget, what these are doing is they are helping modulate the signal of the three audio oscillators that have photocells. So the three white channels right here are all being modified by these. So let me just move my mixes out, and I'll just do one at a time just to see what's going on here. So this is my, if we're going to count these 1 through 9, with 4, 5, and 6 being the light modulated ones, let's go start with number 1. So I believe there's some sort of induction in the circuit that's affecting the oscillation or just draining power from the chip. So there is a little bit of change from these. They're not completely isolated. Or maybe I've forgotten what I've done exactly. So these are just different tones. And ideally these are independent from these three LEDs. So I'm going to skip those LEDs and go over to my red ones, to my channels 7, 8, and 9. Here's one. Here's another. Okay, so if I take a couple of these, if I take this one, for instance, into my, let's pick one that's a little more stable. There we go. So I have this going into 1/2 the mixer, so I'm going to add another audio oscillator to this same mix. I'm just going to play around until I find something I like. So that one has a kind of an interesting texture. So basically I'm choosing this part of the mix here. I'm going to, looks like the first oscillator on the second chip. Following so far? And with the next mix I'm going from the third oscillator from the second chip. So that's what's making this textured sound. Okay, now I'm going to take one of these mixes here and feed in one of the LFO audio oscillators, which is one of these white stripes. So I have it connected to this middle one. So what's interesting is it has a photocell right here, but because of the proximity to these other lights, they will sort of bleed into the bright light coming from the first one, which adds some interesting characteristics, particularly if I have all the lights off and it's a little bit darker. It's sun's fading right now, so I don't have complete darkness or control over the light in here. But that's sort of what I've been playing around with. The other thing I've been doing is kind of piping in a feed to the 10 times mix. That's the third slot here. So I can take one of these LFOs and then really force it to modulate the audio signal. So, oh, and that explains why that's already here. So I forgot I already had all that attached. So you can see there's some sort of interesting behavior happening here just from oscillators turning on and off. The other thing that's interesting is I've got this, there's a spot here to insert a photocell, but I've broken it out with this wire so I can actually move this thing around. So if I actually, let's see, how did I do this? Yeah, so it looks like I've decided to patch this photocell in via these orange cables, which is going to my first oscillator. So that now explains why my first oscillator was so modulated. So let me just try that out. Okay, so I'm just down to one audio oscillator, I think. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm now down to one oscillator, and if I switch to this first one, so what I can do is I can kind of jiggle this, and that bounce will create some interesting sounds as well. And I can feed it down closer to these. If I feed it down closer where all 2 or 3 of the lights are blinking on it, I can use some interesting multiple levels of modulation while I'm playing with this. And keep in mind, that's only one audio oscillator that's using this photocell. If I add in another mix, and then maybe, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so it's still, this is just a static audio oscillator, but the weird modulation is happening because I've attached to this one. So, we'll listen to that again. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is take one of these LFOs and just take the direct current from it. I'm not using the light, I'm just using the pulse that's powering the light. And I'm going to use that to add a 10 times multiplier to the mix. And I should mention all 3 of these LEDs are broken out here with orange, white, and red. So I'm just going to move my 10x mix and patch it into one of these 3 until I get something I like. So yeah, it's getting really noisy and obnoxious, which is kind of what I'm going for. But it's cool because, like, say if I choose this middle one, the light is shining on this resistor and affecting the audio tone, but also the pulse from the middle one is sort of overtaking the mix by multiplying it times 10. And the reason I'm doing that is because this isn't really audible at the regular. I mean, it's a kind of a click, tick, 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 but when I use it to add to the mix, it really modulates the tone. So now I've removed that modulation, but I still have a little flutter. So that's basically what I have going on here. At the bottom, I do have the divider. So the way that at least I understand it, is that whatever pulse is going into it is used as the input, which is clocked here, I think, on pin 10. Yeah, pin 10 is the clock input. So whatever signal it's receiving right here on this pin, that pulse will be divided by 2 on one pin, then on another pin divided by 4, then divided by 8 and 16, and so on up to 4096, I believe. So if I were to take the blinking light, it would divide that blink by 2 on one of these pins. I've got to figure out which one. Let's take a look. Okay, so the divide by 2 pin is 9, which is going to be this pin on the end, and I've got it broken out to this LED right here. So it's probably hard to see. I've got 4 LEDs. This is the first one here. And if I were to connect that to my middle rate LED, yeah, I don't know exactly what I have going on, if I have too much kind of inducted current happening here or what, but it doesn't seem to be behaving the way I expect it to, so I'm going to have to take a look at that. But if I'm really excited to play around with this, see here I have it plugged into one of the audio signals. So the audio signal is clocking this chip and then creating these alternate tones. So I guess what I could do, there we go, I disconnected my mix. This is the tone that it's clocking this. Okay, so that tone is clocking this chip. So if I remove this and plug into different sections, that should give me divisions of that tone. And it seems to be working. So I'm really excited to play around with this chip. I've barely even scratched the surface, and it's probably very hard to see the colors here because of the way the camera is picking up the light. But believe me when I say I'm having some progress here. So I want to kind of break some of this down and kind of rebuild from scratch based on what I've been watching in these videos. I've watched them so many times, particularly number 1 and 2, but I've really, as far as building things, I've only built what I've seen on video 1, with the exception of this divider, this counter divider chip, the 4040B. So next time I record on this, it should be quite a bit different, and I'm looking forward to seeing what I end up playing with. And now that I've got a general idea of what I'm doing, I can really break out and make some interesting things.